System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Friday, January 17th. I am Amin TMK alongside Emoji Lil Tanky Sumler and our special guest, Mike from Turn Leftist. What's up, guys? How are you doing today?
How's it going?
What's up? Probably TikTok share price.
Wow. We'll see.
Oh, they're not going to ban it after all. Who could have seen that coming?
So let's talk about that. I mean, I think that's what we want to get into. Always, you can find Mike on Turn Leftist, and also check out the podcast. Remind me what your podcast is again.
True Crimes of the Empire.
True Crimes of the Empire.
Yeah, please check us out. It's on SoundCloud. Anywhere you can find this fine podcast, you can also find True Crimes of the Empire. Just search for us. And it is the new version of the Turn Leftist podcast. We have some new hosts. No hate on the old hosts. They're welcome back if they want to come as guests. You know, I still love those guys, my dear friends. But we just have I think you guys know how much time and effort it actually takes to do a podcast, especially consistently every week. And I have no ill will toward anyone who does not have that time in their busy schedule, especially if they have wives, kids, real careers, they're not unemployed like me. So yeah, I totally understand, but that's, this is the new show. I have some co-hosts who are degenerates like myself. No hate. I love Jared and Joseph. So glad to have the new guys. Jared's Australian. That's a nice benefit. Everybody seems to like the Australian accent on the show. So we're having a really fun time. So please come check us out. And the Patreon episodes are longer. So if you want to subscribe for $7 a month, I know everyone usually does $5, but we're doing $7 because Bidenomics, inflation actually is bad. So we'll see. I mean, I'll have to drop the price if it doesn't work out. So, but we'll see.
Or you could always set up an office in Xinjiang, where deflation is happening, and then the prices might go down.
I'm definitely considering AI translating our podcast to Chinese and seeing if we take off over there. I want to see if we're if we have some good takes or not.
I always want to get a phone call we see what type of work you guys are doing over there. What do you think about coming over here and maybe doing a little English?
We got some G-Bucks for you after all.
Man, that shit only happens at Danny iPhone.
I know, right?
And look, how about this? Everybody in my DMs and maybe yours is always talking about we're funded by some other, foreign government or something like that. How much is insert this foreign government giving you in there? Insert their natural currency. And it's come on, y'all.
So first off, you know what I'm saying? According to Citizens United, money is free speech. So if somebody wanted to endorse my views with free speech, come with it. But none of that happens, and I especially ain't got no time for that from Chick-fil-A eating motherfuckers. So don't talk to me about what your ethics ain't necessarily there anyway, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, for the amount of time that I've been called a Vatnik online, just for not calling Putin the new Hitler, for not just calling him Putler and saying that the entirety of Russia and all its people are fascist, which is just a level of Russophobia and xenophobia among the American people that is so commonplace now. But speaking of Russian or Chinese influence, we should actually get back to the topic of TikTok, which is what we started to talk about. For an app that is owned by Indonesia, not even a Chinese app,
Singapore, yeah.
Yeah, very capitalist, very strict type of society. So let's discuss it. You mentioned it before. I'll start with you, Mike, and then I'll go to you, Emoja. Just your thoughts sort of on this TikTok ban, why it's being banned, why it's now maybe not being banned, and just your overall thoughts is sort of how the TikTok has been just so politicized for, obviously xenophobic reasons and, China being, possible leader going into the 21st century economically. Just your thoughts on that, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that it was because of the algorithm not being controlled by the U.S., right? They couldn't control what people were seeing. It was exposing the genocide. It was exposing the Western international order for the horrific genocide enabling order that it is. And people in their xenophobia, like you said, even me, I'm confusing Indonesia with Singapore. Just another Westoid idiot. But we couldn't see the difference between these two countries. We're it must be a Chinese-owned app. That must be what's turning people against America. It couldn't be just what America is doing, and Americans are finally seeing it. And yeah, I'm actually happy that it's driven people to red note, whether it gets banned or not. I really don't care. That's the thing I'm more excited about. And it's the red note thing that I'm kind of vacillating between whether that's going to actually open up a new cultural front and open up people's eyes, or whether they will sink back into the path of least resistance and say, hey, remember that couple of weeks we almost bought into a bunch of Chinese propaganda and we thought they had normal lives. And now, thankfully the new app came around and said, oh, actually all of the stuff you believed previously was correct. And you're actually fine. Go back to your lives, go back to TikTok reading or whatever.
I mean, to me, it reminds me of the McDonald's in Moscow moment, right? Like, that's what defeated the Soviet Union. It wasn't economic pressure. It wasn't the United States military. It wasn't NATO. It was motherfuckers wanted to wear Levi's and eat double quarter pounders. That's what brought the Soviet Union down, American culture. And this is what people talk about when they talk about the culture wars, but they misunderstand that by making mainstream culture the only culture here. I think about how different that was in America, even in the 90s. Like, there was alt culture, there was rap culture, there was metal culture, there was pop culture. Right now, there's just one culture. And if you're not that, you're counterculture, which means you're against us in the culture wars. When there are truly, literally other cultures in the world, right? We just overemphasize what American culture is. And this is, to me, I think, the truly interesting thing that Red Note offers a possibility about. Like you guys, the number one question I get in my DMs often is, should I really be afraid of China? And my answer is afraid how? Afraid why? What is the fear? Like, if you tell me what your fear is, we can discuss this in an intelligent way. If your fear is, will China invade the United States of America? My answer is, have they mastered quantum physics and teleportation? Like, how do you get a 1 million man army on the shores of the United States of America? So, like, any fear of a military confrontation on American soil is just as irrational as can be. And if that's your fear, I can't do much other than point at a fucking globe, But if your fear is cultural contamination, then what you're afraid of is losing white dominance, right? I mean, and it's so funny because, in Western culture, one of the first people to really posit that exactly this would happen, and Lord knows, he's corny as shit to me, but Joss Whedon, the whole Firefly thing, by saying, you know what I'm saying, in the future, everyone would speak Chinese, right? It makes sense. I can only do the math so many times. We have 350 million Americans. There are 1,450,000,000 Chinese. If 1 billion disappeared tomorrow, there would still be 100 million more Chinese than there are Americans. And so this is a culture that is a larger culture by way of population than American. We just have an outsized influence where we expect, I'm not going to lie. I take a plane, I go somewhere, I expect to see English signs everywhere. That's not even me as an angry American. That's just my reality. When I travel in other countries, I never have to worry too much. I know my bank cards are going to get used. Mostly my cell phone is going to work. There'll be signs. Someone's going to speak English. We're afraid in the West that type of outsized cultural influence on the world will now be normalized or reduced to what is a more reasonable place as far as the global conversation and culture goes. It's like the Christians. It's like, oh my God, we can't call it Christmas break. Well, everyone at your school is not Christian. As me personally, as a Jew, I'm always like, I don't want to take Christmas break, but I'm all about a winter break. I mean, can we get that? It's the exact same thing. It's the fear of loss of even American cultural hegemony. And that's what Red Note really opens up. When you have these Americans and they're being asked by Chinese people that are clearly not government ops, like, is it true that Americans have to pay for ambulances? Or, the right-wing love answer, go on there and ask about Tiananmen Square. And they're like, yeah, this guy lived for 30 more years. This is a background on everything. And then, like, the Chinese are like, this is a Black Lives Matter protest where the cops just ran the fuck over 30 Americans. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, the propaganda hasn't been upgraded. But China is extremely savvy, tech savvy as well. And so, like, Americans for the first time ever are being exposed to just how much propaganda we live under day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think it kind of goes to this idea of like Americans sort of understanding their own oppression as they have like American exceptionalism is so pervasive throughout our community, even the leftist community, because at the end of the day, there's still mainly white country. It's still a mainly white Christian country. And,
Overwhelmingly so.
it's hard to escape. It's hard to escape whiteness. It's hard to escape Christianity. Even if you reject those things, there's going to be like little tiny cultural aspects that just stick with you, like Christmas music. A lot of people I know like Christmas music and are not fans of Christmas. So let me ask y'all about this. I mean, do you think that I'm going to say specifically about Gen Z. I hate to say Gen Z because it's like all the people who are just like social media savvy are like also experiencing all these different social medias. But do you think that, not only people from China will help understand that like this is not propaganda that the Chinese government is saying, this is actual things that are happening. But do you see like Americans kind of realizing like, oh, you actually live in a shithole country?
I'm hoping for that. I'm really hoping that people start to open their eyes. But I was thinking when you were talking, Little Tanky, about so many of the movies that were in the 80s when people thought that Japan was going to be the thing that conquered America.
Yes.
So much of the dystopian aspect of even movies like Blade Runner or movies that were more pop culture, but it was like
Rising Sun.
Yeah, so many movies were just like, oh, Japan's just you're just going to have to speak Japanese. Like, it's just going to be alongside of English. And that was horrifying to Americans, is that like they would live in the world that like any other immigrant lives in, or any other like multicultural person lives in, like Europeans, Canadians, even, like where there's two languages. Like bilinguality like horrified them so much that was an entire subculture of dystopian movies or whatever. Blows my mind. But that's, the thing that really horrifies these people. And I'm hoping that Gen Z maybe is comfortable enough with it that they start to realize America is the shithole country. America is the fascist country. They are projecting that image onto everyone else. And I was really hoping this would especially open up the minds of like leftists who have done this game where they do the neither Washington nor Beijing, neither Washington nor Moscow. But so much of undoing this American propaganda undoes the basic things that, like, even when Americans understand the word support, it's like you're paying taxes for the empire. So it's not supporting Russia to say that they are not as bad as the US as far as imperialism. Like, they're not imperialists. They're not imperializing other places. They're not even like imperializing Ukraine with the invasion. They're just defending themselves with a special military operation. They're actually just being pretty honest about things.
Protecting people. They're protecting the people of the Donbass.
Yeah, and for me, right?
Taiwan.
Right. I like so. First off, is nothing even close to like that how they make that comparison. Am I back?
Yeah.
Yay.
Comparison.
Even if you were to make the comparison and go ahead and say that the Russians, the Chinese, and the Americans are equally imperialistic and they're all bad. Let's say they're equally bad, which is I reject that premise, but let's say they were. As an American citizen, where then would you be obligated to utilize your energy? Where would you have the most ability to make change in the imperial? I mean, like, as an American, how in the fuck are you going to change the Russian system? Why should the Russians listen to you? You're not Russian, and you clearly don't like Russia. Why should the Chinese listen to you? You're not Chinese, and you don't like China. But America, there's a role you have to say here, right? Like, Taiwan is a great example. I talk about this all the time. Everybody knows Amin and I just came back from Puerto Rico. How can a leftist or a liberal have any type of honest conversation about going to World War III for Taiwan, which itself calls itself a Republic of China, right? Not Republic of Formosa, not Republic of Taiwan, Republic of China. It's a semi-autonomous province like Macau, like Hong Kong, like Tibet. It's not my fault that Americans don't know what a semi-autonomous region is, right? But it is the reality, right? But no one bats an eye about Puerto Rico being an out-and-out colony for more than 100 years. It's not on a path for statehood. It's not on a path of independence. And America would never allow that type of of interference in Puerto Rico. Like Puerto Rico, we started to do some trade, some weapon trading. We're going to make some advanced microprocessors for Russian military. Like it'd be beyond war. I mean, it'd be hot war, like scary war, right? Like, and again, places like I think the Ryukyu Islands are another example. We more commonly call them Okinawa. It's another one of these island chains that are just nebulously gobbled from the empire of Japan, right? Imperial Japan. The people of Ryukyu don't consider themselves Japanese. The Japanese certainly don't consider their Ryukyu indigenous part of Japan. And those conversations, they're just completely missing from these conversations, right? So like the kind of person, the kind of liberal, the kind of leftist that has this great draw to Taiwan. I just wonder where that type of activism is when it comes to Hawaii, when their type of activism is when it comes to Guam, right? Another nebulous place that is part of the American empire. Most Americans couldn't even pick it out on a map. If I had like $100,000, like show me the island that's Guam, like could not happen, right? But they're willing to go to nuclear war, right, for Taiwan, right? And so like without ever thinking about the propagandistic elements of that, because even within your praxis, you're not maintaining what you believe. If you believe these indigenous deserve the right to self-determination, well, great. Serbia deserves to be its own country. The Donbass deserves to be its own country. Crimea, right? It falls flat whenever you're talking about someone not an American sphere of influence.
Well, isn't it so funny that like once you start to see the media narratives, then you see like when people come into a comment section and they're seemingly just there to muddy the water about the most important event that is going on right now, which is like World War III level events at geopolitics between Russia, China, and the US, and then their, resulting client states like Israel and stuff like that. As soon as you start trying to talk about what is the most important aspect, like the US needs to stop meddling in these affairs, just basically needs to back out in every aspect. And that will be the best thing it could do in every one of these situations. As soon as you start to say anything to that effect, or that, let alone that like the American citizens should make moves to that, to pressure their government to do those things, they just seem to come out of nowhere and say, well, what about equally standing up against these other countries that I hate for some reasons that seem to coincide with the New York Times, Washington Post, like mainstream media narrative that we know is like Mockingbird controlled, that we know answers to the deep state, the actual deep state, like the CIA and everything. And when you call that out because it's so blatant, then they just start to say, well, you're just like a tanky. You're just like everything's the CIA. I guess it's like
guilty.
This is just reality. This is just the fucking reality we live in. And to call people out on these things is to say like, look, you don't have to be, I don't think you're on the payroll of the CIA. I don't think you are literally a Fed in my comment section. I just think you read this still liberal progressive media that tells you to be concerned about micro politics in the US sphere. That's like stupid bullshit because you're really worried that they're going to go on a Holocaust against like trans people. It's like the trans genocide will continue the way it has been, which is like ignored by the state as like individual violence is done to trans people because they're marginalized. And that's the fascist state you live in. And you're worried about it getting more explicitly fascist, and you're worried about the other countries in the world that fascist state is telling you are more fascist. And it's so wild because the whole purpose is just to keep you pacified and going to work and then not resisting the one government that is actually oppressing you and letting its own citizens oppress you as well because it doesn't care about you. It's wild.
I love that language about muddying the water, right? Because I feel exactly the same way. Like when they use language like Putin is a fascist or Putin is a Nazi, right? To equate him to Hitler when, the reality is 30 million Russians died fighting Nazis, right? It wasn't all them conquered Nazis. It was brought into the Russian military system. They were brought into the NATO military system, right? Because we muddy words like fascist and we muddy words like Nazi. We use these words as derogatory slights for people that we don't like.
And then ignore swastikas on the Ukrainian soldiers.
Right, or the granddaughter of Mussolini, you know what I'm saying? Ruling Italy, right? So these are actual fascists. These are countries that have an actual tie to Nazi work, right? People that were not penalized in the ways that you thought. People that were allowed to go to Argentina And now you look at how Argentina is. People that were allowed to go to Canada. And you have, the outgoing prime minister saluting Nazis. Oh, thank you for your work in World War II. Word?
Yikes. Yikes.
Okay, right? Like, you don't see Putin making those mistakes, whatever mistakes Putin is making, right?
Yeah.
This is a man that if I don't believe anything else in the world, I believe two things. Putin loves money, right? And Putin hates Nazis. Those are two things I believe to the bottom of my soul. You would think in 90s America, that would be a person you could work with, right? And they were willing to work with him when they thought he would be a weak leader like Gorbachev, when they thought that he would be the kind of weak leader that would allow them to continue to strip all of Russia's mineral wealth to the West for pennies like they do in the Sahel. Right. Mm-hmm. And he turned out not to be that guy. And so now, and you can't call him a communist because fuck, man, Putin's got more money than Trump. He's clearly not a communist. Right. So like all of the things that are supposed to be like normally you celebrate those kind of people in the West, except that he doesn't do what we tell him to do. And as for like the people in the comments, this is one thing I truly believe in my soul. None of those motherfuckers are real. If I didn't go to high school with you, if I haven't seen you in real fucking life, I don't know if you're a op, a bot, a both. I have no fucking idea who you are. I just know whenever I post about China, here comes Johnny 859 327K talking about what about Xi? Oh my God, Mao was a dictator, right? I have no fucking idea if you're a real person.
Mm-hmm. But USA and UK flag in bio for some reason.
Right.
Yeah. There's two things I think that are like important for us to combat. I think the first one is sort of this idea of, and this is a hot button subject, not for us, obviously, but just for the algorithms. And that's sort of this treatment of the Uyghur minority in China. They're a different cultural group. And there is sort of, again, this red note conversation surrounding Tiananmen Square. I think Tibet is probably another one. And sort of the hot button subject here is, the Uyghur G side. I think it's been properly debunked, but, that's one of them. And then the second thing. Sorry, my laptop is about to die. Good move with me. Not charging a laptop. The second thing is this idea of China's exploitation, and Russia's as well, of Africa. We see, I hear this all the time. And we had a conversation, me and Tanky, on the last episode. But again, I think, like you said, Mike, it is interesting to see how Americans can look at their own country and see that everything that they do is worse than the country that they're pointing to and saying, look how bad this country is. And it's like, but the country that you live in, the country that you can enact change, a country that you can truly have a voice, you'd like to downplay the oppressive nature of that country. So you can point out the country of, let's be real, non-white people, because that is what white people and Americans love to point at. Look at those non-white people doing these bad things and having cultural differences for us. And you mentioned sort of the LGBTQI plus trans community. Like, can you point to a place in the world where like these people are this demographic is is protected and they don't have to face sort of the stringent ideologies and the things that go with that? Like, that just unfortunately is not here. I'd like to fix that in our community here in the United States. Go ahead, Tanky.
No, I'm just saying it's the kid in the minivan all over again. What about yourself? Worry about yourself. Like, you can't. What the fuck are you reasonably gonna do for the trans population in fucking Dubai? What are you gonna do other than say some shit on the internet? But it's probably a trans person on the bus that you're looking at fucked up right now.
Yeah, you give somebody $20 or help someone find a job. And I think it goes back to like this idea that Americans are exceptional and that the rest of the world is not. And I always see people always visiting this place and they're on a vacation and they're taking pictures. And I'm like, you don't see how the entire vibe of, especially when you visit in the global South, how the entire vibe is different, how community is different, how the things that we do in the United States are so incredibly capitalistic that it is hard for families outside of a nuclear family to like coalesce and like help each other through things. So yeah, anyway, it was just a little bit of a rant. I do want to ask, yes, China and Africa, and as well as, the Uyghurs and all that other stuff. Amoja, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, so how about this? How are they exploiting them? Right, by building infrastructure. Like, is that the exploitation that's happening by making trade deals where they're win-win trade deals, which is what China is going for, because they're not investing in you to get a quick money dump loan sharking operation where, oh my God, you're going to default like the World Bank does, right? Or the IMF. They're not doing this to bankrupt your company in 5 years. They're betting on where you're going to be 50 years from now, because they already know the West is going to do everything they can to keep their populations insulated away from Chinese products, which again, right, goes against everything that we were taught: fair trade, open borders. So then why are we tariffing Chinese, manufacturers, from BYD to Huawei? Because Apple knows their product can't fucking compete. Because Tesla knows their product can't fucking compete, right? And so then you get people like our outgoing president, who has led us so fairly, talking about beware of the technological industrial complex. Like, ain't those the people that funded your whole campaign until they didn't and went over to the other guy? I mean, this is some bitter grape shit, man. Like, you've done we're up to and including, don't forget, under Biden, I believe it was, imprisoning a Huawei executive in Canada. Like,
I forgot about that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because someone wanted to buy a fucking phone? I mean, Come on, man. So the Americans understand, right? And it goes back to the red note thing, because again, the important thing was to always make Americans believe their standard of living was the highest. And now they're seeing that is absolutely untrue. And like, the people that have enslaved you are your corporate owners of the American government, right? When the reason, like, it's easy to say America doesn't want BYD to come to America because it hurts Tesla. And that's obvious and it's easy to see. But it goes so much deeper than that. America needs you to go to GMAC and buy a $50,000 car so that you can then go to the bank and get a loan for $50,000 that they can continue to get interest off of forever, right? Whereas if you're buying a $10,000 car, you might literally be able to save that up in a year or two. There's no need to get a bank loan, right? You literally are that much close to not being insolvent in debt. And people that are not insolvent are much harder to control politically. You don't have to worry, well, I can't say free Palestine, I'll lose my job, I'll lose my insurance, right? You don't have those obligations because you don't have those debt loads, So like, again, when you're in my DMs asking me, is China going to conquer us? I mean, shit, financially, they might free you.
I have been so excited seeing all these videos from Red Note where people are talking about like the grocery hauls from Chinese citizens and what they're able to afford. I'm trying to find the video. I downloaded it earlier, but like that's
PPP, purchasing power parity, which is a better indicator for countries than the GDP, which only really works for the stockholding class.
So this TikTok user, I'll plug them, Esme, ESMEEE, 3 E's, JAIR.
Totally a real person.
Well, no, trans comrade that follows me on TikTok that I just found this morning.
Okay, cool. So you know them.
Like talking to people on Red Note, saying like they're actually very accepting of trans people in China. Like your rights are actually much more because you have social services. You have like all the things that we have been saying as tankies. It's like rather than having like the nominal rights and the performative like liberal rah-rah and waving a bunch of flags, like you actually get social services and people just leave you alone regardless of your identity because it's not about that. Like it's just a different kind of culture. But they had made this video explaining exactly that kind of thing. It's like that's what I'm saying is I'm scrolling through my camera roll now. I have like 15 videos queued up. I cannot wait to post on the Instagram account just to show people like what they've been missing out on, what we've been saying for so long. But now they could hear it from the mouths of people who aren't tankies, who aren't like just me or you guys like saying the same thing over and over again, like beating the drum of like, actually China and Russia are okay. Like I made that NPC meme the other day where it's like the 4 panels and the person says, wow, China's just a normal country and their people are just like us. And then the other person says, yeah, wait till you stop being racist about Russia too. It's like, that's really what it comes down to. Like so much of this, and I love using the old formats. Like I'm such an old head in that way, but I don't know. It's just like, I'm really hoping that this creates what we wanted to create and then people just don't settle back into their ways. But I'm also kind of paranoid. There's just going to be like a wave of people who move to China and then like don't talk about it. And then like that, again, it just settles away in the media cycle and people go back to their miserable lives here in the US because all the people who were like smart enough to realize to get out while the getting is good, like do it. And then they just don't bother going online saying, actually, I'm having a great time. They just, because I can imagine not feeling the need to brag online, just like if you just go about your life.
I made it. I'm safe.
A billion and 4 Chinese people we're just talking to now who were doing that. And we didn't realize, like we had no idea until this week.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, that's a fact. I mean, but also, I just want to say, you can also understand the reasons why somebody that escapes from the West and is able to go to some other place might not want to poke the bear because you have no protections at that point. Like, whereas there are certain alphabet organizations that are at least theoretically obligated to ignore you while you're in the continental United States. Once you leave, all of those protections are gone, and accidents, they do happen. I can totally see why I made it. I don't want to poke the bear. I'm free.
What do you guys think? You guys think we're going to see like a new resurgence of TikTok with a bunch of content creators that have a suspicious resurgence in the love for America? And they say, actually, now the TikTok app is paying us even more. And I can't believe I fell for some of that red note propaganda for those couple of weeks. Like, what do you guys think is coming?
Well, I mean, think about how many people from the State Department are employed by TikTok already, which is why, again, the conversation is a bit of a red herring. Like, you don't control the algorithm. That's true. But it's not like you don't have a great deal of say-so in at least what is displayed in the American audiences. That whole mythology of like there's no control at all, that is just untrue. It's simply the ownership is not American. But the content manipulation, that's been there from at least the past 4 years. There's been a significant amount of people from the Department of State and other organizations that have, let's say, at least an advisory capacity in the organization of TikTok.
Yeah. Let's not forget that there was a lot of those influencers that were coming out and talking about the watermelon people, and they all just kind of came in on the same time.
Never seen them before.
Yeah. And there's also like, I think one of them was like Brooklyn Dad, like the Democratic, the Democrat loving like Brooklyn Dad or whatever. And I think like, you know, but to your point, Mike, I think there's always a backlash of some kind when it comes to, you know, like the pushback against the State Department narrative. You've seen this with Palestine as well, in huge force, because people know about the Palestinian conflict very well, much more than they know about, you know, the situation in Taiwan, the special military operation, you know, the forces that are, you know, destabilizing the Congo and Sudan. These are more difficult to kind of, you know, pick out. You know, Palestine is like much more obvious, you know, because, you know, for many reasons, but yeah, one of them is you probably know someone who's Arab or Muslim or something. You have that sort of connection. And I think that's a lot of times what America needs, like a connection, a personal, emotional connection to something. And, you know, maybe through social media, that's the way that they do it. But yeah, I do see a situation where there's a lot of backlash coming around, especially for those people who are on Red Note talking about, you know, hey, the Chinese people are actually not bad. And this is another point that I wanted to make. And I hear this a lot about Russia when I say that I like Vladimir Putin, that I think he's a smart guy and a good leader. People really ready to kill me.
Because at least respect his leadership capacity.
You know, but of course they
what they want us to say. Haven't died in a nuclear war yet.
Yeah, which again, there are many people in Russia that are far to I don't want to say to the right, but to the military are pushing for more to be done.
Right.
Again, so you don't know that you're seeing a moderate person, you know, but I want to say this last thing, and then I'll, Mike, you can jump in, Emoji, you can jump in, whatever. You really cannot tell the story of the world without talking about China. They may be the most important country and important culture in the history of the world. What Mao did in terms of bringing a new you know, socialist idea through all of China and pushing the, Chiang Kai-shek and this, drug, these big drug smugglers, to Taiwan, which is just what happened. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to say that that's what it is.
Chiang Kai-shek was a drug dealer.
It's no way around it.
It's
And
a fact.
they went to Taiwan. And now that Western, that desire, for the Western backing permeates throughout their elections, even though at least 60% of the population does not want to be independent. So yeah, again, it goes to the thing of yes, I think Putin is a good leader. Again, I don't agree with everything he said, but again, I'm just a one dude in America. That's just one person. So when you talk about the world and you don't have respect and you don't want to show love towards China, which again, I think is a great culture. I deeply respect that culture. And again, another thing, South Asia and Asia in general, there's lots of different places. Some places are Muslim. Some places are Buddhist. Some people are Western backed. Some people are, are more towards China. We literally seeing this in Korea right now where, the North is going, nah, we're going to stick with China. We're going to stick with Russia. We're going to stay on our real stuff. And you looking at South Korea, which just, their president is gone now. They're going through all things. This is what happens when you align yourself with the West. And I think, again, Americans can do a better job of understanding these thousands and thousands of year-old cultures and just respect them a little bit more. What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Tank, you have anything before I go? Because I have some thoughts.
Sure. Okay. So one thing I would remind everybody is, of course, there's about to be a backlash cycle. Do not forget, less than 2 months ago, the United States Congress authorized a $1.6 billion anti-China propaganda bill. So that's inevitable. And already coming in, we're talking about how the Department of State, which is really the people that lead the empire, right? From an outward face, that's their job, manage the empire. So you've got Mark Rubio saying that literally, and this is the quote, that China is the biggest threat facing the United States ever.
Yeah.
The most potent and dangerous near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. So not the slave-owning Southerners, right? Not the swastika-waving Nazis. No, those are not, right? It's just these Chinese, right? Where does that kind of a mind state come from? If not an irrational desire to maintain hegemonic control. Because once you establish that there is no military threat, China has literally zero desire to have a military confrontation with the United States, but is also unwilling to back down because of 100 years of the era, what was it, the era of humiliation, the century of humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never do that again. You know what I'm saying? And so, what's that phrase? It's Xi Jinping said, sleep with your rifles ready and wait for dawn. You know what I'm saying? Wow, what a mind state. We're not trying to get at it, but sleep with your rifles and prepare for dawn. So
use your weapons as pillows.
Use your weapons as pillows and wait for dawn. Yeah.
That's wild. It is crazy to think about because when the US says that, it's I know you're comparing it and saying, Lil Tanky, it's not the Nazis at home. It's not literal Nazis in your borders. It's not any of the other real threats, but they're kind of right. China is the biggest threat because the only other actual biggest threat that U.S. State Department could point to as being a threat to its existence would be itself, literally its own ambitions. And it would have to point to something that is almost ephemeral because it's not any of even the people who are in there. I have all these posts queued up again about Butcher Biden and Kamala, Holocaust Harris and Butcher Blinken or whatever. It's these are awful, awful people to be sure, but they will be replaced with people just as awful who will be just as genocidal. And so then what do you point to? Is it the documents? Is it the office itself? Where is it just exists in an ether of this agenda, regardless of who is there.
My question is, why would competition be seen as threatening? I thought competition was what was supposed to make free enterprise work and the best ideas win, right? Why is competition threatening?
Because the real spirit there, the ephemeral thing there is just white supremacy. It's just the desire to have white supremacist American hegemony. And that's why the people who low key want that, even the leftists among us, have to go spiritual with it or have to go conspiracy brained or just some kind of new agey like woo woo thing because they can't point out what the real contradiction is, which is just fucking white supremacy. And so like I think it's a real tragedy, like you're saying, Amin, that we don't know enough about the East just in general. There are so many rich cultures in the East, but we've been so West and Eurocentric our entire lives, and we have that drilled into us that like we don't even recognize that it's not just China. Like it's like the fetishization and the weebooism and stuff, like it's old hat now to say like all these people are just like, well, I kind of like prefer Japan to China. Like, no shit, dude, because you're a fucking fascist. Like, we get it. Like, shut up. But like, there's so many cultures. Like, some of them are brown and they are in the East. Some of them are like, a lot of them are Muslims. Like, they're not just like people who speak Asian languages like you think of them. There is so much to Asian culture in the East, and that's been lost to us. And I really try to like think about it in a way that is like not going to be like fetishizing them, because my interest in all of it is like humans. I'm just interested in like what a whole bunch of humans are able to accomplish. And when I see China, like that's why I like China, not because I fetishize anything about Chinese culture or I even care about like the writing or language. Like, it's cool, it's great, it's cool. But what I like is that they have been able to use communism. They are very successful with communism, and they are the biggest threat to the US. Like, I love that about them. Like, fucking great. That's awesome, because I don't like the US and its white supremacist mission. It's that simple. Like, and if you are an anti-imperialist, you should also feel a similar hatred toward the West and its imperialist missions abroad, because it's like, it's awful and genocidal. It's going to kill us all if we don't do something right away. It's great. And like, China will show you the way to do it. You just have to be open to that message. And I'm just really glad to see all these comrades on Red Note. It's so cool. Getting back to like the original theme of the episode. It's great.
Yeah, man, geopolitics, it goes all around. And that's what I love about it. I truly do. It's like, the thing about China is they won't allow themselves to be bullied. And so because they won't be bullied, they're presented as the bully. And that is just truly fascinating framing. It goes to show the strength of the American message still. Because again, I as a tanky, I look at everything through terms of force, right? And force projection. How much force can the Chinese enforce on America right now? Almost none. There's an end of the world scenario where we both fly those things and all civilization ends. But other than that, there's just not a lot China's able to do. America right now has bases in Japan. You have bases in South Korea. You have bases in the Philippines. You have bases in the Ryukyu, right? They're able to project force in a real way over China quite often. Now, what the results of the attempts to inflict force would be is a whole nother conversation. But there's the ability to even project that power. The Chinese have no ability to project that power over America at all. I see them as a guy who's been punched a whole lot, that went to the fucking gym, bulked up, and is like, you're not going to kick my ass anymore. If you hit me, I'll hit you back. You know?
Well, a couple of things, like,
right?
2 things to that. Like, it seems like China is the guy that went to the gym, but then also went to the library, because like China is not using the force. Like, it seems like China has learned, and like just as all the other anti-imperialist bloc has learned, that if the US's weapon is force and creating instability, their weapon is stability. Their weapon is the Belt and Road Initiative. Their weapon is to re-educate people, like literally. Like, I know you had brought up the Uyghur thing, and I meant to bring this up, but like I have my copy pasta. I don't know if I like read it on my show anywhere, but like, basically, what I tell people is that the US, the UK, and other NATO-aligned nations, NATO being a traditionally anti-communist organization, claim China is committing a genocide against Uyghur Muslims, keeping them in camps, forced sterilization of women, killing them, etc. But most of these claims come from Adrian Zenz, an admitted far-right ideologue, the NED, another anti-communist org, Radio Free Asia, which is tied to the CIA, and 8 individuals who claim their family members have been kidnapped or killed. Their stories have a lot of holes in them, including the family members themselves publicly refuting them. Several independent investigation orgs have found no evidence of a genocide, merely detention centers used to house and rehabilitate individuals involved with far-right Islamic terrorism, including every major Muslim country, with the exception of Turkey, which is very far-right and obviously tied to the US and NATO. The U.S. has admitted to funding, arming, and planning these terrorist attacks in Xinjiang. And like, it goes on for 2 more paragraphs that are just as long, but basically the U.S. is again accusing other countries of doing what it is doing itself in its ICE detention centers, where it is sterilizing women of color. China is actually providing family planning services to people who didn't have access to that because they were in like pretty fundamentalist sects of Islam that prevented them from having access to those services. So if you see some birth rates dropping, it's like, yeah, I imagine some birth rates would drop if like Amish people started having access to birth control all of a sudden because they became modernized. It's like, you can judge if you want to, but you're just not understanding the whole situation. And it's actually more liberal than a lot of the leftists and seemingly progressive people here would think. And that's also not to get into, you were mentioned Taiwan, like Chiang Kai-shek gets a lot of hate for being a drug dealer, as he should, but General Helliwell, like I am obsessed with the Gladio operation and how the U.S. started the entire drug war and drug epidemic, started using heroin as a tool to fund all of its secret operations, and then distributed that same heroin in its own country to impoverish, subdue, and pacify citizens while sucking them dry for the money for its operations. Like, it's so nefarious, it's so bad, and it's such a deep, crazy conspiracy that you sound like a nut if you talk about. But this all should be the stuff of movies, except that same deep state controls the movie industry as well, so it's never going to be. Like, so we just talk about it on YouTube here. Like,
it's not a conspiracy, though. Like, when you look at the historical fact that the United States learned empire from the British, this was the price for the United States coming in to bail our ass out from the Nazis, teach us the ways, right? This is literally straight from the playbook of the century of humiliation. The whole an drugged population is much easier to control. And this is literally what the British did all throughout Asia, right? Forcing the Chinese to take opium because they had a trade imbalance, right? I mean, literally, and you can go straight to the what was it, the French connection in the early 20th century, right? Where these guys are literally, French intelligence are trading opium with the mafia, right, in America to continue to control the French Empire, which is why, again, all of these drug rates go down so much as the Western empires fall, right? Vietnam was a loss to the French because this was one of their largest opium growing manufacturing places. And you still got to see that with the cartels that rose up, the triads that rose up in those areas, which in many ways, Myanmar is still fighting to this day. Right? Like, all of this always goes back to drugs. And so it's not a conspiracy theory at all. It's literally the Western playbook, which again goes back to the irony of the human rights of all of this. You know, a little guy named Gary Webb died to tell you that story.
Yeah, there's one more question I wanted to ask y'all. Mike, I appreciate you for coming on again. This week, Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan show. Not that I watched it, of course. But he kind of came out and he was like, well, we're getting rid of the community flagging or community guidelines or whatever. We're not going to be flagging people. He came out and kind of talked about how, Joe Biden and the Biden administration, at least, were coming down heavy on sort of the things that he could, the things that had to be taken down. We experienced it a lot. Anytime we posted Joe Biden wandering off somewhere, they'd go, but he's not wandering off. Okay. There was a butterfly.
He had to be.
And that butterfly is rare, and he wanted to see it, and those are kind of things that, right. Like, again, we have to be treated as kids or whatever. So, then we have, again, we were flagged for a bunch of stuff, for something the other day too. I think a bunch of other leftist accounts were flagged. So again, it's like, I'm not quite sure what he's talking about.
Less censorship now, come on.
No, I don't think so. And of course, they already seen this on X. Again, anytime you talk about what we talk about, there is going to be a subtle algorithm that tells you, no. Let's put that a little further down. And I think that's what Tanky was talking about a little bit earlier. Even it's just the fact that TikTok isn't fully 100%, going through this, American government sort of slight change to the algorithm. And it was
the Department of State doesn't want to have to ask. They want to be able to go in there and get rid of content. Right. And that's what doesn't exist right now. Having advisory committees means you can be aware of the trends. Oh, my God, anti-Semitism is up 700%. Whereas with Instagram, that would never happen because you just adjust the algorithm off the rip. Right. They don't want to have to ask a non-Western, non-Five Eyes government permission. To them, that's already tantamount to surrender. We had to ask them to take this down. I mean, ask yourself why the rest of the world doesn't grow marijuana simply because the DEA will show up and burn down your crops. Like those are American laws. If Ecuador wants to grow cocaine, why should I as an American care at all? If that's part of their economic plan, if they want to grow cocaine in Colombia, why do I as an American care? It's on, I'm sorry, borders. It's as opposed to throwing Haitians, beating them with whips and whatnot. Maybe, I don't know, be at the border and really have some customs where you can check what's coming in and what's going out, as opposed to destabilizing nations all over the world to maintain laws that may not even exist in these countries that you're enforcing them in.
Yeah. So my question is, like what do you see the future of social media? Like where do you is it going to just continue to go down this road of, being stringently, controlled? I mean, we experience it on YouTube, like we're not allowed to go live and weird stuff like that. I mean, do you see the same more or less?
For a year. I can't go live on Instagram for a year. That was just in the, I know you guys are in the same group chat, but it's been popping off. You may not have seen it, but like a couple of users in there just happened to check in their account settings, like to see when they were able to use their live settings again. And they were banned for an entire year from it. And the one user, surprise, 1913, I believe it is. She's got great content. She's like just a, comrade out in the Midwest somewhere, who was like going on live. So you can see this is like a real person, just like a normal American person, who hates the empire like we all do. And of course, once you expose yourself as being like a content creator in that way, you're not just on there, hey, here's how to homestead, here's how to get along with the decline of capitalism, here's how to like raise a bunch of animals then you can eat in the collapse that we all know is coming or whatever. It's like, if you're not doing that kind of thing, you're going to get pummeled and you're going to get deleted and prevented from going live for a fucking year. It's wild. So yeah, that's the future of the internet, is like them boosting the people that are doing the comfortable things, doing the convenient things for empire and its mission. And then deleting anyone, but then also denying that they're doing that, saying like, this is a totally free speech platform, which means now you can say the N-word all you want. You can call people slurs and you can be as fucking bigoted as you want all day long, even though that's already been happening. It's like, we've all been like, the first time I came on here to talk to you guys was like shortly after I'd gotten my page banned, and we were talking about how all the reports we make, like, I have a whole section in my Discord server just called Report These Fascists. And it's every time I report a blatantly fascist page, like doing some anti-Semitic propaganda or something really bigoted, I report it. I send a screenshot when I get an Instagram message back saying, yeah, we didn't think that was a problem at all. That was fine. Go fuck yourself. And then I put it in the channel and we all just commiserate, because what else can you do? Like, that's the internet you're on, whether you like it or not, in the fascist country.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to, render unto Caesar, right? Just give you that whole thing, because when you remember that Milnet and DARPA made the internet, there should have never been an expectation that it was going to be some platform for free speech, right? So start with the understanding of what the internet is and what it existed to do, right? But from beyond that, you have to look at the fact that as long as technology is extraordinarily expensive to create, the billionaires will always control the conversations, right? Like, in the 90s, maybe you would just go on IRC, and maybe 15 or 10 people in your little IRC chat room. You can talk about whatever the hell you want there, because no one really cares. But when you start having a platform that regular people were never meant to have, regular people that were not controlled opposition were never meant to have 50,000 people they could talk to live. That's just not the nature of how the system organizes itself, right? There's a reason why the Kardashians will have millions, right? And why leftists, after about 10 to 15,000 start to get reported, 20,000, oh, there's a community wild, right? Because they don't control that message. And if you don't make yourself immediately available to the empire, they will they will unplatform.
Kind of like Africa Stream. Africa Stream was like at 300,000 or something like that. Not to mention sort of their platform on X as well. So you're and TikTok as well. So you're like tripling that to the point where even Anthony Blinken, who's on his way out, is still being like, look, places like Africa Stream, And another thing too, and I'll this another last little question, my final to y'all is the whole Biden creepy speech at the end where he's like, and the biggest problem we have is disinformation and misinformation. And it's just like always about, I see this like if I go over a person's house, like that's not, just like a regular person, and they're like watching the news or whatever, and like the end of the local news, or they're like, and don't get your news from social media because that's all lies. And it's like that's the thing that they're trying to do is just convince everyone that, well, they're lying, but we see it. Anyway, your thoughts on that, Mike, and we can.
They still do too. It's funny. It's like boomers will still get their news or information from social media, but it's always like the worst stuff. It's always like, did you hear there's litter boxes in schools now? It's like always the dumbest shit. Like, I don't know. It just blows my mind sometimes. I feel like, the propaganda gets really lazy. It doesn't really have to be that good, particularly because some people will still buy it. What do you think, Emoja? I have some of the thoughts, but I wanted to see what you thought first.
So there was a movie called Revolver, and it talked about the stages to a con. I quote this movie all the time. I got pros and cons with it, but one of the things they talked about is the older a con is and the more elaborate, the more outlandish it is, the easier it is to believe, because no one can believe something has happened for so long. No one can believe the scale of it, right? It's much harder to get away with a small lie than a huge lie. George W. Bush, we're in Iraq because they hate our freedoms. What the fuck does an average Iraqi give a fuck about some construction worker in Pittsburgh? Yeah. They don't know you. They don't give a fuck about you. They got their own shit. You know what I'm saying? But it's easy to believe that. Well, we were attacked. Well, there was an attack, right? So it's easy to believe those things. Plus, when every year you're making a little bit less, when every year everything costs a little bit more, when every year you're a little bit more home insecure, job insecure, you don't have time to be a fucking researcher. You're doing good if you throw it in Google. What are they supposed to know about JSTOR, reading peer reviewed articles, and there's such a disenfranchisement of intelligence, where you want them smart know-it-all. No, I am an expert. I am what you would call in a court of law an expert opinion, right? Just the normalization and the flattening of opinions, right? Where what I believe is just as important as what you believe. That's verifiably untrue. Your ego makes it more important to you, right? These are the kind of things, because the ego manifests itself internally, you can never see where it's compensating for your lack of knowledge. Whereas in a physical way, if you were to go into the gym with a power lifter and you see, he's lifting 800 pounds, you're not gonna be like, I can pick it up if you picked it up, right? It's like, motherfucker, I picked up some geopolitical books and I've read a lot of speeches and I put tons of hours into this, more than reading the New York Times, right? No one wants to believe that it's that deep, because it would force you to reimagine everything that you took for granted about the American experience. And honestly, full circle, that's what's happening in Red Note. Everything they've ever been told about China, they're finding out is a fucking lie. I'm sorry that your ego makes you feel like you're so important and that Xi Jinping is waiting on you to join Red Note. We've got him. It's Lefty 547. We've been waiting for him. All right, let's commission go. Let's get the ops in. Let's show how good the Xinjiang province is, right? To your point, when you're talking about Tibet, and liberals are as bad as anyone else about these things. Oh my God, we've got to do something about the poor Tibetan people that,
Give them back their slaves, please.
Right? Tibet has been part of China longer than Texas has been part of America. You sound fucking ignorant, and you are ignorant, and that's okay, because ignorance can be combated by reading, but you have to read the right things, and America does not make that easy. Ignorance is not an accident in America. Ignorance is the de facto mode of being. And you show yourself, right, by not being ignorant. That's how they know. Oh, fuck, this fucker's read the right thing, Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite things to ask supposed anti-imperialists, the people that we're arguing with, I just ask people now, liberals, under what conditions could you have your mind changed? What would actually change your mind? If you describe the situation, what would have to happen for you to think that it's actually the U.S. and not Russia that is imperialist, or that Russia just isn't imperialist even compared to the U.S.? Any of the things that we're arguing about. And usually it is the case. Like usually you can just actually present facts, whereas then all they can do is say, well, I just don't see it that way. And usually leave the conversation. That's usually when they block you, is when you present enough facts where you try to get down to the core. If you don't get emotional, if you don't start resorting to like personal attacks, which is also something they like to do, they're just like, oh, you just think America bad. You're just one of those like tankies.
I do.
But,
As descendant of American slavery and the Native American genocide, I do. I think America's bad. I think we have. I don't think Americans are bad, but often they are. But America, the institution, rotten.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so much of that is just not having the goldfish memory. It's just remembering that, like, when they accuse China of using child labor, it's like, well, just remember 6 months ago, we were talking about Nestle using slave labor and how our slave labor that we all live on is just outsourced through companies rather than through countries. And we get to blame global South brown countries for that slave labor, even though it's our American companies that are exploiting them because our American military bases are there to hold those governments in check. It's like, it's all because of us. We just have outsourced the responsibility as well as the slave labor. But that's why it makes it so galling when on the way out, someone like Biden says there's going to now be an oligarchy. There's going to now be a technocracy, and now you're going to live under techno-feudalism. It's like, bro, last day of the 4 years in office, you're going to, as you did nothing to stop any of that. Like, what? Like, it's so...
He literally empowered it and funded it. I mean, that's the thing about Zuckerbot. Zuckerbot was perfectly willing to be Biden's, or at least to put it on Biden, right? And now there's a new master and he's shown his compliance to him. I just want you guys to know there's been too much feminine energy. Like, what? Like, buddy, straight all right with this shit. Like, okay, spoken like a man going through a divorce.
Great conversation. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate the time that you guys take to deliver to the people the information that we need, and I'm just very, again, thankful for I'm thankful for China. I hate to say it, like I'm thankful for
for BRICS.
Yeah, and
thankful for the resistance wherever they are, however they manifest.
Yeah, and again,
nature of war is a vacuum. We need balance.
Yeah, I think we've seen that the Biden administration was as bad as it could have possibly been with the ceasefire coming up. This conversation surrounding TikTok coming back. I mean, it just looks like the Biden administration is just fumbling and stumbling out of this, out of the office, and just makes Trump, who's another horrible, horrible, terrible person, look competent. And that's, I think a bit frustrating.
I got a question for you guys on the way out. Which member of the Biden administration is going to do the best over the next 10 years financially?
I want to say Blinken, right? It's got to be Blinken.
It's got to be Blinken. I was thinking that.
He's got to be like he's got too many of the Mossad ties. Like,
his net worth about to go crazy.
Unless he's not going to stumble and bumble. Like, he's good with American, like, rhetoric.
Let him keep doing what he's doing. He'll do all right. He'll probably swing back to Raytheon or Lockheed, make some money with that. But no, man. Yeah.
Unless we get the 2026 Israel collapse entirely that we really want, then Blinken will be on the chopping block. Like, a lot of people will be running to places like that we don't expect. They'll be living secluded lives in the woods of, like, I don't know, Argentina or some other, like, the places where the fascists tend to run to. But I would imagine Blinken, he just seems like he has like I was just seeing today, he has like his father, like uncle, or they were like tied to Robert Maxwell and like all these other. Mm-hmm. It's really gross, man. It's like insidious.
I think he's gonna run for president in 2028. Shit, he's done the job for the past 3 years.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't even want to
ask you guys on the way out, like, what do you think about the ceasefire? Because I know it's a big question to ask us.
Ceasefire?
It's obviously Israel's going to violate it. They already are like starting to bomb apartment complexes in Lebanon. They were just doing that out of retaliation because they always do that when they're starting to get close to a ceasefire. They do like their worst, most terroristic activities to civilians because they just do it as an act of vengeance because it's just awful.
Yeah,
they're just genocidal people.
I think there's sort of two ways to look at it, right? There's sort of Palestinians are celebrating, and like I view that as news. I view it like important to see the people who are suffering through this genocide, like have some sort of some 60 days or whatever it may be of some sort of slight amount of
45 days.
refuge. But I think if you are a serious person like we are, you know that Israel's going to do everything it can to violate that ceasefire, like they did with the Northern Resistance, and like they did with Iran, and like they again, they're habitual line steppers, and again, this is not something that they wanted to do, and I can't imagine that that much positive will come from it. But
My two takeaways about the ceasefire are this. One, Trump needed to establish dominance over Netanyahu because Trump sees himself as the Messiah, the Christian Zionist Messiah, and Bibi sees himself as the Jewish Messiah. And there can only be one. It's Highlander rules. And he's like, I'm not Bibi. I'm sorry, I'm not Biden. You will not embarrass me. You will do what the fuck I tell you. And it starts with this, right? But the other thing is, and it's quite this simple. Contrary to what Americans think, bullets and bombs are not limitless sources, unlimited sources. They need time to restore and reshape their military forces because the great game never stops. And Iran is the next step. Got to focus all the guns in the right direction and move on past this little shit. Sorry to say, to the great powers, Gaza is a little game and a distraction. And Trump wants to be done with that distraction to move on to big boy things. Iran and then China.
Yeah. It's tough to know what to think of the ceasefire because obviously, like we've been saying, Israel will violate it. They will violate it immediately, now, while it's happening, afterwards. So it won't mean so much, and it'll probably return back to the state of like pre-October 7th at best. Like that would be the best that you could possibly, and it won't be that because they're going to have more militant control over the areas that they do and let any Palestinians back into, and they will be given full throated control or endorsement to doing this by the U.S. and all its proxies. It's also bad that it makes Trump look so confident. Like I've seen already, like even from leftist pages, they had this like narrative they're going with where it's like literally a fanfic, and they're telling the story of like one of Trump's aides telling Bibi like, you're going to meet me in your office tomorrow at 10 a.m. on the Sabbath, and Bibi saying like, no, I can't, it's Sabbath, and then doing it anyway, and then just being like laying the hammer down, saying like a couple words to him like, you're gonna take the deal, fuck off, like just like it's like a fanfic, and it's like it's bad that like they gave Trump the opportunity to look so good by literally delaying putting any pressure whatsoever on Netanyahu or Israel for the last 15 months. It's like they could have done anything and they did absolutely nothing, and now they make Trump look good. And it's terrible. It's like, but hopefully then it does mean something good.
It should wake a lot of Democrats up.
Yeah. Liberals. I mean, liberals. They jumped around. They beat and moaned about how it was going to be a worser G side when Trump came in. You know, and it's like you realize how foolish those statements that you made, and the fact that those people who did vote for Kamala, you voted for nothing. You voted for G side. You gave up your soul for nothing.
Yeah, what does it feel like to know that you overlooked genocide over someone and then still lost? What does that feel like?
Badly.
And you're talking about woke shit, man. Like you're the kind of person that'll block somebody for not using the right pronouns, and you're like willing to overlook genocide. It just shows the vapid emptiness of the liberal mind state.
Yeah,
but they
and
talk
that's
about
why I think.
Yankees.
Yeah. Again, I think our biggest crime is being right about something too early. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're everywhere you find podcasts. We're on old terrible Spotify. You know, we don't make no money when we do our music. It's 0.0013642 cents. And if it's a track with me and Tanky, we're splitting that in half. But we are on Spotify because we want to be accessible. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all the good places. I also want to make sure you guys are checking out Turn Leftist on Instagram, and also the True Crimes of the Empire podcast. I'll put more in the description below. I want to give a shout out to our patrons. Y'all been holding it down. The community is growing, it's building, and I really appreciate y'all. Let's give a shout out to Sophia San Marco, Kate Sauer, Monica Marcial, Joe DeVito, Laura Joel, Nikki Infield, Riggedy Pellegrino, Nat the Rat, Lucy Newman, Samantha Guerrera, Dumpy, Tom LeBeau, Turn Leftist, Kelly Lieta, WZ22, Jay Gallart 94, No Ground, RK, Paula Poderosa, Lissa Piercy, Lauren Bullock, Suzette Tavin, Dennis Amadeus, y'all the real heroes. Let's get a final word. I'll start with you, Emoja, and then Mike, you can take us home. Any final thoughts from you, my good friend?
The world is big. Love people that you don't know. They ain't even gave you a chance to hate him yet. Just let the fucking hate go, man.
Yeah. I mean, just start learning lessons. Like, start letting all these things teach you to become an anti-imperialist, to become a tanky. Like, my grading personality, I know I push people away from it just by being such an asshole all the time, but like, my personality aside, just join the tankies. We actually are right about things. But that being said, let me just plug my podcast one more time. I know I didn't do a good job of it at first. It was just like rambling, but we actually do have like a decent show. I've like written some decent notes. We talk about true crimes of the empire. We actually talk about historic events where the empire did commit horrific atrocities to millions of humans. And we talk about those from the perspective of the victims. And so we're going into history. Our first series is about South Africa, and it's going really well so far. We're having a great time. So yeah, come check it out. It's anywhere you can find a podcast.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you again, as always. Man, it's our pleasure. It really is. For Mike from Turn Left, this is Emoji Little Tanky Sumner. I am Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.